Good evening, YouTubers. I posted a bedtime story last night, a selection from The Great Gatsby, and of course it is one of my favorites. But tonight, when thinking about what I wanted to do as far as a bedtime story, my mind kept going back to a story that I wrote myself several years ago. I've been thinking a lot today about the concept of finding redemption for oneself in spite of life's mistakes. And I thought about a story that I wrote almost 20 years ago when I was in a creative writing class in high school. So I thought that I would read to you that story tonight. It's called Mama's Lullaby. As dusk fell, John could hear footsteps pounding the concrete floor of the corridor outside the cell. He felt the cold steel of the key as it turned in the iron door. It was the guard. "Dinner," he said grimly. There was a biting chill in the dimly lit cell, so John welcomed the hot soup and coffee. He ate slowly, not sure if he was trying to savor the last meal he would ever eat, or if he was simply trying to delay the inevitable. How strange it seemed to be eating this meal, knowing he would never eat another. The hot coffee coated his chapped throat, but nothing could really chase away the coldness inside of him. Everything was finished. The preacher had been there and would visit once more in the morning to offer final prayers before the time came. There was nothing to do now but think of what had been and what awaited with the coming of the dawn. As he lay on the hard cot, in his mind, John began to replay the events that had led him to this place, the events that had sealed his fate. Why had he done it? Why had he even been in that bar that night? Why was he carrying that gun? The fight had spilled outside onto the sidewalk, and he didn't even realize what he had done until it was too late. John tried to sleep, but each time he closed his eyes, all he could see was the face of that young boy, staring up at him with his bright blue eyes as his life ebbed away further and further under the streetlights. There were so many questions, but no real answers, and John knew that it didn't matter now anyway. The people had called it justice, an eye for an eye. It seemed odd that John found himself agreeing with them. Through the trial, he had never denied anything, nor tried to save himself. That late summer afternoon when the judge passed the sentence, John felt a weight lift from his heart as if an unresolved matter had come full circle. He knew he had done something wrong, and he knew that he would have to pay for it, even if it meant paying with his own life. Part of him was afraid and even wanted to cry, yet part of him felt it was only just, only fair. Through all the long months waiting in that cold little cell, he had refused every appeal. Now the waiting was almost over, and John was glad. He was sorry for what he had done, but he knew that just being sorry would never be enough for that boy's mother, and deep down, not enough for himself either. As daylight disappeared from the tiny barred window, his mind began to drift back in time to the fiery sunsets of his Alabama youth. John could almost see the showers of red and gold leaves and smell the wind as it carried the scent of autumn wildflowers across the fields of his family farm. He remembered so well sitting on the big rock beside the fence when the horses came in from the pasture each evening, watching as the blood-red sun sank lazily behind the green clay hills. As the first stars of evening began to twinkle, his mother would always call him to the house for a supper of the sweet vegetables he had helped to grow. After he had eaten his fill, John loved to sit in his mother's rocking chair beside the radio, listening as the music played through the night, spilling out through the screens of the windows and on to the porch. Thinking of the simple songs that had lullabied him, he smiled. It was so good to remember better days. How he wished that he could turn back the clock, or stop it just for a moment. Just one moment. That would be enough to taste the mellow pumpkin pies of October, or smell the velvety red roses of May. It would be enough just to see his mother again, or to hear the old song that she used to sing as she puttered about her housework. wake up, darling Maggie. What makes you sleep so sound? Boys, go dig a hole in the meadow for to lay my Maggie down. Memories were all he had left. What a strange twist, John thought, a life once so good turning so bad. He was the only child, the apple of Mama's eye, and in one moment it was all gone. John was glad that Mama had died almost 10 years ago and wasn't able to see what had become of her pride and joy. Long into the night, as the candle on the small table beside his cot burned low, John's eyes began to feel heavy. Soon it would be over, he thought, and then he could rest. As the moments ticked quietly away, John found himself praying that the next morning would be as simple and peaceful as that foggy Sunday morning when he and a preacher had laid Mama to rest beneath the soft, cool grass. A simple prayer with no tears and no regrets. That was what he had always hoped for, but it was not to be. John turned his head from the candlelight and closed his eyes for what seemed a moment. Suddenly, he was sure that he heard something. He opened his eyes and looked up, thinking that it was too wonderful to be real. There, in the shadows created by the flickering candle beside his bed, sat Mama, with that smile as comforting and as beautiful as he remembered. It was like her to be there just when he needed her most. It was just as when he was a child, frightened by the spring storms, with her tucking him in by the candlelight and singing that sweet old song. Only this time, he knew she was singing it for him. Wake up, my darling Johnny. What makes you sleep so sound? Soon they'll dig a hole, but they'll never lay my Johnny down. They would not lay him down, John thought to himself, nor could they really kill him. He could let go now. Mama was there. Past, present, and eternity came together as he felt the smooth, loving hand stroking his forehead. And that voice, the same voice that had calmed his fears so many times, sang back a lifetime of memories as the pitch blackness outside became a dim purple and ash orange. John felt himself let go. He knew that Mama knew what he had done, but she still loved him, as mamas always do. He was still her boy. The time was coming soon, in only moments perhaps, but it was all right. John smiled as he chased the haunting melody out of the tiny window and into a peaceful world where there were only memories. Less than an instant seemed to pass, and then cool breezes suddenly swept around him in the north field. John opened his eyes and looked up, the sun blazing radiantly in a clear blue sky. He was finally home. As he skipped stones across the creek, he heard Mama calling him to the house. John ran swiftly through the waving grass, feeling the wind on his face as he closed his eyes, almost certain that he could smell the fried chicken of the Sunday dinner. That was Mama's Lullaby, a story I wrote myself, tonight's bedtime story, and I hope everyone has a good night. Good night, YouTubers.